Tyler Hargrove didn't even glance up from his phone when he said it. The words came out casual, almost bored, like he was canceling a lunch reservation instead of ending a career that had carried the company through its biggest transformation in decades. You've served your purpose, Sophia. Time for new blood to step up. I stood there in the corner office on the 47th floor of the Apex Dynamics headquarters in downtown Chicago. The same navy blazer I'd worn through the final all-night is still carrying faint traces of stale coffee and printer toner. 19 months. That's how long I'd poured everything into this $4.9 billion merger between Apex and Vanguard Tech. 19 months of airport lounges in Atlanta and San Francisco. Red-eye flights. Negotiating until my voice cracked. Rewriting clauses until my eyes burned. I had balanced tax structures, antitrust landmines, intellectual property minefields, and cultural integration plans that could have sunk the whole thing if anyone had blinked wrong. And now, with the ink barely dry on the final signatures from yesterday afternoon's ceremony, Tyler, the 32-year-old son of CEO Victor Hargrove, was firing me. Without cause. Less than 24 hours after execution. He finally looked up, flashing that practice smile that had gotten him through board meetings and society galas, but never a real negotiation table. Don't take it personally. It's just business. We need fresh perspectives now that the heavy lifting is done. The room smelled of expensive leather and the faint metallic tang of fresh corporate victory, champagne flutes still scattered from the celebration. The echo of backslaps and toasts still hanging in the air. No one else was there to witness it. Just Tyler, his executive assistant hovering awkwardly by the door. And me. I felt the tremor start in my fingers. The kind that comes after too much caffeine and too little sleep. But I kept my voice steady. I built every layer of that agreement. Tyler. Every contingency. Every safeguard. He waved a hand dismissively. And we appreciate it. HR will handle the details. Standard package, 3 months. NDA. The usual. You'll land on your feet. People like you always do. He didn't offer a handshake. Just turned back to his screen as if I had already vanished from the payroll. I walked out without another word. Badge still clipped to my lapel. Laptop bag heavy on my shoulder. The hallway felt longer than usual. The glass walls reflecting my face, tired but composed. Dark hair pulled into a tight knot. Eyes carrying the weight of every unread appendix I'd memorized. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I finally let the numbness settle in. Not anger yet. Just a cold confirmation. They were exactly as I'd feared. Entitled. Short-sighted. Drunk on the illusion of control. I didn't go home to my apartment in Lincoln Park. Instead, I drove straight to O'Hare. The Chicago skyline shrinking in my rear-view mirror. At the Delta counter, I booked the next available flight to Aspen. One way. No checked bags. Just me, the laptop, and the encrypted drive containing my personal master copy of the merger agreement, the version no one else had full access to. As the plane climbed into the clouds, I opened my personal laptop in the dim cabin light. Page 2894 of the master document. Appendix G. Subsection 7.3.2c. The clause I'd buried so deep that even the most diligent reviewers had skimmed past it during the final rounds. In the event of involuntary termination without cause of the designated contract architect within 36 hours of full execution, all restructured liabilities assigned to the Hargrove Family Trust shall serve as collateral for immediate equity asset redistribution to the designated beneficiary entity. I had drafted that language 18 months earlier, during the first round of trust restructuring talks. Tyler himself had insisted on shifting certain liabilities into the family trust. Makes the balance sheet look cleaner for the board presentation, he'd said at the time. Chest puffed with inherited confidence. Put it under my umbrella. Shows decisive leadership. No one had pushed back hard enough. Why would they? He was the heir apparent. Now that same decision was about to detonate. The trigger had been pulled the moment HR walked me out. I highlighted the paragraph in soft yellow, the color of caution signs ignored, and navigated to Schedule 17. The subsection outlining the exact mechanism. $285 million in reallocated equity, quietly reassigned to Summit Legacy Partners LLC, an entity I'd quietly incorporated 2 years earlier through a trusted attorney in Delaware. Irrevocable. No clawback provisions. No appeals process that could unwind it in time. The plane touched down in Aspen as the sun dipped behind the snow-capped peaks. I rented a modest SUV and drove up the winding roads to a small cabin I'd booked under a different name. The kind of place with a stone fireplace and views that forced you to confront your own thoughts. Inside, I set the laptop on the wooden table. The screen's glow the only light in the room. I typed a single email to the in-house counsel. Reference Appendix G. 7.3.2c. Triggering event confirmed at 14:17 Central Standard Time. Please validate per Schedule 17 protocols. Send. No explanation. No gloating. Just the facts. Time-stamped and documented. Then I closed the blinds, poured a glass of water, and waited for the silence to fill the space where triumph or regret might have lived. There was only the soft crackle of the settling cabin and the distant howl of mountain wind. The first call came while I was standing on the cabin porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket against a Colorado chill. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I let it ring out into the pine-scented air. The second followed minutes later. Still no answer. By the third, they had already started leaving voicemails. Voices rising from calm concern to barely masked panic. Back at headquarters, the discovery unfolded like a slow-building storm. I could picture it vividly from the details I'd anticipated for months. Jenna, the senior compliance analyst, would have been the first to open my email. She'd scroll to Appendix G, frown at the yellow highlight, then cross-reference Schedule 17. The color would drain from her face as the implications clicked, the 36-hour window. The specific trigger language tied directly to the architect's termination. The collateral clause funneling assets straight out of the Hargrove family trust. She'd flag it to legal, then finance, then the general counsel, Marcus Reed, a man who had reviewed hundreds of pages but admitted once over drinks that he trusted the experts on the nuanced sections. Marcus would call an emergency huddle in the executive conference room, the same room where the champagne had flowed yesterday. Tyler would saunter in late, still riding the high of his decisive first act as the new de facto leader. "What is this urgent meeting about?" Tyler would ask, dropping into the head chair with practiced authority. "We just closed the deal of the decade." Jenna would slide her tablet across the polished table. The document zoomed to the fatal paragraph. Appendix G. Subsection 7.3.2c. The termination of Sophia Reynolds yesterday afternoon activated the Equity Realignment Protocol. Tyler's smile would falter. "What protocol?" "That's just boilerplate cleanup language." Legal cleared it. Marcus would clear his throat. Voice tight. "You personally requested the liability shift into the family trust during the penultimate review round. We advised against it for exactly this kind of exposure. You overrode the recommendation." The room would go quiet. Someone from finance, perhaps old-school board member Eleanor Park, would lean forward. "The transfer is already processing through the automated systems. $285 million in preferred equity moving to an external LLC. Summit Legacy Partners. Registered 2 years ago. The beneficiary is her." Tyler would laugh at first, the sound hollow. "This is ridiculous. She can't just steal from the trust. We'll unwind it. Get the best firm on it. Call my father's attorneys." But Eleanor would shake her head slowly. The language is airtight. No ambiguity. No force majeure escape. You signed the final version yourself yesterday. She built the clause months before anyone suspected her role would be expendable. Panic would ripple outward. Phones would start buzzing with investor alerts. The stock ticker on the wall screen would begin its downward tick as whispers leaked to early media contacts. Tyler would pace, face flushing. She planned this? All along. No one would answer directly. They wouldn't need to. The metadata on the clause revisions carried Sophia Reynolds' digital signature from every iteration. The woman they had just labeled redundant had been the architect of their greatest vulnerability. Meanwhile, in the Aspen cabin, I watched the first news alerts pop up on my phone as I sipped black coffee. Apex Vanguard merger rocked by executive shakeup. The articles were vague at first, but the timeline was damning. Termination at 2:17 p.m. yesterday. Transfer initiation logged at 6:45 a.m. this morning. I didn't feel glee. Just a deep, bone-settling exhaustion mixed with the quiet satisfaction of precision engineering finally tested in the field. Another call. This time from Victor Hargrove himself. Tyler's father, the man who had built Apex from a regional player into a national powerhouse before handing the reins to his son with too much optimism. I let it go to voicemail. His message was clipped. Furious. Sophia, we need to talk. This is fixable. Call me immediately. It wasn't fixable. I'd made sure of that. No backdoors. No discretionary overrides. The clause executed like clockwork because contracts don't care about apologies or power plays. They care about the words on the page. The signatures. The timestamps. I had spent 19 months ensuring every word was unbreakable. As the sun climbed higher over the mountains, I walked the snowy trail behind the cabin, boots crunching softly. Flashes of memory surfaced. Late nights in the war room arguing antitrust carve-outs with Vanguard's team. The moment I caught a hidden IP conflict that could have cost hundreds of millions. The quiet pride when Victor himself had once clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're the glue holding this together, Reynolds." All of it reduced to legacy dead weight in his son's eyes. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. I thought about the moral weight of what I'd done. Was it justice or just another form of corporate savagery? The entitled prince had pulled the trigger on his own empire's artery, but I had placed the blade there long ago. The question lingered in the cold air, unanswered, as my phone buzzed again with another desperate Chicago number. The boardroom meltdown reached its peak around midday Chicago time. I followed the unfolding chaos through a private feed of alerts I'd set up months earlier. Nothing illegal. Just public market data, internal Slack leaks from sympathetic contacts, and the rapid escalation of media coverage. Tyler's voice carried through the imagined scene with increasing desperation. "We can fight this," he shouted, slamming a fist on the table. "It's fraud. Coercion." She manipulated the language. Marcus Reed, the general counsel, remained calm but firm. "The courts will see it as a valid contractual mechanism. You approved the trust shift. You fired her without documented cause within the window." The language explicitly ties the two events. Eleanor Park interjected, her voice carrying decades of boardroom authority. "The PR hit is already brutal. CNBC is running with heir apparent's first move costs family $285 million. Investor calls are flooding in. 3 major funds are demanding an emergency governance review." Tyler paced near the windows overlooking the Chicago River. Tie loosened, face slick with sweat. She was supposed to be the legacy holdover. Dad kept her around out of sentiment. I was cleaning house, showing I could lead without the old guard micromanaging every clause. The room fell into a heavy silence. Victor Hargrove's recorded voice from an earlier speakerphone call echoed in their minds. You fired the only person who truly understood the machinery. Fix it, or don't bother coming home. Outside my cabin, the afternoon light filtered through the trees in golden shafts. I sat by the fireplace, reading the latest leaked details. The transfer had fully cleared the automated systems by 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time. Summit Legacy Partners LLC now held legal title to the equity stake, irrevocable, clean, documented in Delaware filings that would take years and millions to challenge successfully, if at all. I remembered the exact moment I decided to embed the clause. It was during a particularly grueling negotiation session 18 months prior. When Tyler had first started inserting himself into high-level discussions, questioning my recommendations with half-formed ideas gleaned from business podcasts. I'd seen the writing on the wall then, the coming power shift, the inevitable push to sideline experienced voices once the deal closed. So I'd added the safeguard, buried it meticulously, and waited. A text came through from an old colleague who had survived the purge so far. They're tearing the place apart looking for loopholes. Tyler looks like he's aged 10 years. Victor is on a plane from Palm Beach. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped outside again, the crisp air clearing my head. The mountains stood indifferent, timeless against human folly. What did victory feel like when it came through paper and patience rather than confrontation? Not the rush of triumph, but a quiet validation, the sense that intellect and foresight could outmaneuver raw entitlement every time. Back inside, more alerts rolled in. The stock had dropped another 7%. Shareholder lawsuits were already being drafted. Tyler had reportedly stormed out of the boardroom, only to be summoned back by his father's arriving team of crisis lawyers. The narrative was solidifying in the press, brilliant architect dismissed in a display of hubris. Hidden clause activates. Fortune shifts overnight. Headlines called it the most expensive pink slip in recent corporate history. I poured another coffee and let the warmth ground me. The ending wasn't fireworks or public gloating. It was this, sitting in silence, watching the consequences unfold exactly as engineered, while the snow continued to fall softly outside, covering the world in a blanket of quiet inevitability. Victor's arrival shifted the tone from panic to controlled fury. He walked into the boardroom flanked by two senior partners from the top white shoe firm in New York, his presence commanding even in crisis. "Where is the full documentation?" he demanded, voice low and measured. They spread the agreement across the table, pages highlighted in frantic colors. Victor scanned the critical clause himself, lips tightening. "You overrode legal's warnings on the trust exposure?" Tyler, now seated and subdued, nodded weakly. It looked clean on paper. "I wanted to streamline for the presentation." "You wanted to look decisive," Victor corrected coldly. "Instead, you handed her the keys to the vault." The crisis lawyers confirmed what everyone feared. The clause was enforceable. Attempts to challenge it would drag through courts for years, costing far more than the $285 million already gone, and likely failing due to the clear intent and mutual signatures. Media scrutiny would intensify. One partner muttered, "This reads like it was written by someone who anticipated exactly this scenario." Victor stared at his son. "She anticipated it because she saw you coming. 19 months of 80-hour weeks. Travel. Sacrifice, and you thanked her by calling her redundant." The room absorbed the weight of that statement. Tyler's earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by a pale, hollow expression. Calls from major shareholders continued unabated. One fund manager had already publicly questioned the company's leadership succession plan on a financial podcast. In Aspen, the evening brought deeper cold and clearer skies. I built a small fire in the cabin's hearth, the flames dancing against the stone. My phone showed missed calls now numbering in the dozens. Victor's team had escalated to polite but insistent emails requesting a good faith discussion. I read them once, then deleted the thread. Flashbacks came unbidden. The early days of the merger, when Vanguard's team had tried to bury unfavorable terms in the IP schedules. The nights I'd spent alone in hotel rooms refining language that protected both sides while safeguarding the core vision. The quiet pride when the deal finally closed to applause. All of it rendered invisible by one arrogant decision. The moral dimension pressed in. Had I become what I resented, someone willing to weaponize complexity against human error? Or was this simply the natural consequence of a system that rewarded the careless with power until the fine print caught up? The fire crackled, indifferent to my questions. News alerts updated. Hargrove Air faces board revolt after costly firing. Anonymous sources described Tyler as shell-shocked, Victor as livid but pragmatic. Market valuation had shed over $400 million in after-hours trading. The story was spreading beyond finance circles into mainstream headlines, framing it as a cautionary tale about reading every page. I stepped onto the porch, once more, breathing in the sharp night air. Stars glittered above the peaks like scattered clauses in an endless contract. The transfer was complete. The empire had a new crack, one that would take generations to repair. And I, the overlooked architect, had become the unforeseen variable no one had modeled. Weeks blurred in the mountain quiet. I stayed in Aspen longer than planned, the cabin becoming a temporary sanctuary where the outside world's frenzy felt distant. The legal challenges materialized as predicted, motions filed, depositions scheduled, but the core transfer held firm. Summit legacy partners quietly assumed its new position. The funds redirected into diversified, low-profile investments that ensured stability without ostentation. Tyler resigned under pressure before the next board meeting. Victor assumed interim control, issuing statements about strengthening governance and learning from missteps. The stock slowly stabilized, but the Hargrove family fortune bore a permanent scar. Media retrospectives called it one of the most elegant corporate self-inflicted wounds in recent memory. One evening, as twilight painted the snow in soft blues, I received a final message from Victor, not through lawyers, but a personal note forwarded discreetly. It was brief. You built something extraordinary. I wish I'd seen the full picture sooner. The company will survive, but the lesson will endure. No demands. No accusations. Just acknowledgement. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat by the window, watching a raven hop across the fresh powder, head tilted in quiet curiosity. The contract, my masterpiece of precision and foresight, hung like invisible art in my mind. Lines of text that had outmaneuvered bloodlines and boardrooms alike. The experience left a lingering shadow. Power disguised as legacy. Hubris wrapped in entitlement. The quiet revenge of the meticulous against the impulsive. In the corporate world, words on paper could shift fortunes faster than any speech or strategy session. Yet the cost echoed, relationships fractured, trust eroded, a young man's potential derailed by one unexamined decision. As I prepared to leave the cabin, packing the laptop that had served as both weapon and witness, I wondered about the broader question it posed. How often do we sign away our futures in haste? Blind to the clauses buried in life's fine print. The mountains offered no answers, only their steadfast presence, reminding me that some structures outlast human error, while others crumble under the weight of overlooked details. The drive back toward the airport felt different, lighter, yet marked by the indelible imprint of what had transpired. Victory wasn't loud or celebrated. It was the quiet certainty that justice, however engineered, had balanced the scales through intellect rather than force. And in that silence, the story lingered, a cautionary whisper about reading every word, respecting every architect, And never underestimating the power hidden in plain sight on page 2894.